Before chronicles, before documents, even before words, there were traces. Broken objects, fragments of everyday life, signs of cults and presences that the land of San Marino has preserved for centuries. They do not speak for themselves, but if we know how to listen to them, they tell a story of encounters, transformations, and unexpected continuity. A story that spans proto-history, the Roman world, and late antiquity, long before San Marino actually appears in written sources. In this episode, we try to reconstruct it, starting from the bottom, from the ground, from the archaeological discoveries that shaped San Marino's antiquity. We will tell you all about it after the theme song. Welcome to the Oldest Republic. I'm Federica. Join me in this adventure. Enjoy the episode. The history of archaeological research in San Marino did not begin with large-scale excavations, but rather with isolated discoveries, insights, and comparisons with neighboring territories. At the end of the 19th century, the discovery of rich Villanovan grave goods in the necropolis of Verrucchio rekindled scholars' interest in the whole of Romagna and, consequently, also in the small republic of San Marino. Thus began to take hold the idea that San Marino too could preserve traces of ancient settlements. Some materials found near the border are reported to be similar to the Villanova culture and attracted the attention of scholars working between Bologna and Rimini. However, these discoveries are almost always fortuitous, lacking adequate documentation. In those years, in San Marino, the protection of antiquities was still fragile and inconsistent. During the same period, the core of the San Marino State Museum took shape, which we will discuss in more detail in the next episode of the podcast. Established as a heterogeneous collection rather than a scientific institution, the museum soon became a point of reference for the study of local antiquities and a place for scholars to meet and exchange views on the materials reported or preserved. The year 1912 marks an important milestone. The Italian archaeologist Innocenzo Dall'Osso, intrigued by some discoveries made in Florentino, visits San Marino and describes for the first time in a systematic way finds that can be traced back to the prehistory of the territory. His attention focuses on a bronze axe interpreted as evidence of human presence as early as the Bronze Age, and on a Villanovan crescent-shaped razor, which suggests a presence even in the Iron Age. Dall'Osso also identifies levels of soil that could belong to an ancient settlement of huts, reinforcing the idea of stable settlement on San Marino hills. Despite the excitement generated by these observations, no systematic excavations were undertaken. Even subsequent discoveries, such as those made in 1935 near the towers, failed to translate into further projects. And for decades, San Marino archaeology remained suspended between obvious potential and missed opportunities. A first step was taken only in the mid-20th century, when engineer Gino Zani, whom we already mentioned in the 10th episode of the podcast, conducted the Republic's first official archaeological excavation. This is a limited intervention, but one with strong symbolic value. For the first time, the territory is being investigated methodically. However, systematic research only began many years later, between 1990 and 1992, with the excavations at Tanaccia and the creation of a dedicated archaeological section in the State Museum. Meanwhile, frequent chance discoveries continue to demonstrate that not only Mount Titano, but the entire territory of San Marino has considerable archaeological potential. Set in the Romagna region, rich in ancient settlements, San Marino no longer appears as an isolated outpost, but as a part of a landscape that has been inhabited and frequented since ancient times. It is on this basis that the decisive discoveries we are about to tell you about come into play. We have already spoken about a site called Tanaccia. Its discovery represents a real turning point in the study of San Marino's antiquity, and, once again, it came about as a result of chance find. Tanaccia is a natural cave carved into a rocky outcrop just south of the third tower. Research has confirmed that this was a sacred area, probably linked to a worship of healing waters, as suggested by the infiltrations inside the cavity. The site was used in several phases, initially between the 5th and 4th centuries before Christ, then particularly intensively during the Roman Republic and early Empire, and finally again in late antiquity after a period of abandonment. The cultic nature of the site is attested above all by the materials found there. Some small bronze statuettes depicting male worshippers stand out, placed there as a token of gratitude or as a request for healing. The oldest bronze statuettes, dating back to the pre-Roman times, are schematic and show figures with their arms open in a typical gesture of prayer. The more recent ones, from the Roman Republican era, feature ritual attributes such as the patera for libations or the incense container, a sign of a rituality that was now fully integrated into Roman society. The healing function of the sanctuary is also reflected in the anatomical votive offerings in terracotta, parts of the body symbolically offered to the deity, bearing witness to illnesses, pains, or requests for healing. Other fragments, such as female statuettes, complete the picture of a place of worship frequented for centuries, whose interpretation remains partly open. Coins also play a central role. Over 100 specimens dating from the end of the 3rd century BC to late antiquity. Their distribution accurately reflects the evolution of the site, with a period of intense activity during the Republican era, a gradual decline during the Imperial era, and a new, more sporadic presence in later centuries. Some coins come from distant places, indicating that Tanaccia was part of a wider trade networks and represented a point of contact between local populations and the Roman world. The artifacts are now kept in the State Museum here in San Marino. Ceramics, a true fossil guide for archaeologists, also contribute to confirming this trend. Fine tableware and cooking pottery belong to the earliest times, while after the 1st century AD, documentation becomes significantly scarcer. Some objects, such as tools related to metallurgy or personal ornaments, also suggest that Mount Titano was already inhabited between the end of the Bronze Age and the beginning of the Iron Age. However, research does not stop at Tanaccia. Excavations conducted near the towers and in other areas of the mount have revealed proto-historic settlements which were established between the 12th and the 11th centuries BC and inhabited until the 5th century BC. These are probably villages with huts adapted to rocky terrain and used for long periods of time. The materials found indicate intense contact with the hilly and coastal areas of the Romagna region and confirmed that Mount Titano was not a marginal location, but an integral part of the settlement and trade networks of proto-historic Italy. Overall, these data paint a picture of a territory that was inhabited, frequented, and rich in meaning long before the Roman era. Mount Titano thus emerges as a veritable layered archive, capable of telling a story that has its roots in proto-history and paves the way for the transformations of the centuries to come. Between the end of the 4th and the beginning of the 3rd century BC, the landscape of the territory changed radically. The key date is 268 BC, the year in which the Romans founded the colony of Ariminum, today's Rimini. Ariminum quickly became a strategic hub of primary importance. This is where the major roads connecting central Italy to the Po Valley and the upper Adriatic converge. This road system not only facilitates military movements, but also profoundly structures the circulation of people, goods, and ideas. Mount Titano and its slopes are thus located on the edge, but not outside of a territory that is now fully Romanized. The most profound sign of Roman presence in San Marino is not so much urban as rural. Romanization mainly involves the organization of the land. Centuriation redesigns the plains, reclaims land, and marks out the distribution of agricultural settlements. During the 2nd century BC, numerous rural settlements, farms, and villas appeared, permanently transforming the landscape. In this context, even the sanctuary of Tanaccia, in its second phase of use, took on the role of a colonial place of worship, a meeting point between Roman colonists and local populations of pre-Roman tradition. Archaeological data provide a fairly clear picture. In such a small area, most of the known sites date back to Roman times. These are mainly agricultural settlements scattered throughout the area, with a higher concentration in the hills facing Rimini. Alongside agriculture, based on the cultivation of the most fertile fields, the saltus economy was also widespread. Woods and pastures were exploited for livestock farming, timber, and the production of building materials, favored by the availability of clay, water, and forest resources. One of the most significant complexes is that of Domagnano Paradiso, not far from the site of the famous discovery of the Domagnano treasure. Here, excavations uncovered a Roman villa overlooking the Ausa stream and, further away, the Adriatic coast. The complex was built in the 2nd century before Christ and expanded in the late Republican era and the early centuries of the empire. The villa comprises a production area with facilities for processing wine and oil, a cistern, and a residential area now largely lost but evidenced by high-quality building materials. The presence of kilns is particularly significant. It attests to the continuity of production activities well beyond the classical Roman era until late antiquity. The materials found indicate a complex agricultural economy with cereal crops, vegetable gardens, orchards, and large areas used for grazing. Domagnano Paradiso is thus one of the most important and best documented Roman settlements in the territory of San Marino. Overall, the Roman era marked for San Marino a long period of integration into a broader economic and territorial system. Mount Titano did not become an urban center, but remained a stable and active presence within the Roman world, integrated into its productive, road, and cultural networks. It is against this profoundly transformed landscape that the dynamics of late antiquity and the origins of the medieval community will take root in the centuries to come. The post-classical era represents a decisive turning point for the territory of San Marino. It was during this period, against the backdrop of the crisis of the Roman Empire, that the first Christian community linked to the figure of Marino took shape. The events surrounding the saint, as was recounted in the first episode of this podcast, are known to us mainly through the Vita Sancti Marini, a hagiographic text written centuries after the events, rich in suggestions but lacking historical certainty. Beyond the chronological inaccuracies, however, the story paints a credible picture, that of an unstable world undergoing profound transformations, in which Roman structures are finding it increasingly difficult to guarantee security and control. It was in this climate that Christianity gradually spread from the coastal cities to the inland areas. Alongside written tradition, it is above all archaeology that sheds light on this phase. The territory of San Marino was fully involved in the major events of late antiquity, including the Greek-Gothic wars fought between the Byzantines and the Ostrogoths during the reign of the Eastern Emperor Justinian. The Goth presence is well documented in San Marino and leaves some of the most significant evidence of the entire period. Perhaps the most famous discovery in the entire history of San Marino archaeology is the Domagnano treasure, which was also discovered by chance in 1893. This is an exceptional collection of gold and precious stone jewelry decorated using the cloisonné technique. Today, it is no longer believed to be a hidden treasure, but rather the grave goods of an Ostrogoth noblewoman dating back to the 5th and 6th centuries. The eagle-shaped brooches and the extremely high-level refinement of the objects point to a barbarian elite that was fully integrated into the political and cultural framework of late antique Italy. Unfortunately, the discovery was not followed by a systematic excavation, and the artifacts were dispersed among major European and American museums. Only thanks to recent experimental reconstructions has it been possible to restore its original appearance. The presence of such a high-ranking burial suggests the existence of important Gothic settlements, such as that of Domagnano Paradiso, which was inhabited until the mid-6th century and then abandoned during the wars. Overall, late antiquity appears to be a complex and fragmented yet crucial period. It was during these centuries of crisis, encounters and transformations that San Marino began to take shape as a more stable community, ready to enter medieval history and, for the first time, to appear more frequently in written sources. What we have experienced today is a story made of traces, fragments and silences, a past that remained buried or lost for centuries and which slowly began to come to light thanks to the observations of scholars and archaeological researchers. But recounting the antiquity of San Marino also means recounting how this past has been rediscovered, preserved and interpreted, and this is precisely where we will start in the next episode, dedicated to the birth of San Marino's cultural institutions and the history of the State Museum, a place that is not only a collection of artifacts, but also a meeting point among memory, research and identity. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back in a week. Until next time, goodbye.